Now, what we are trying to do is expand because it is obvious that we're going to need new blood. We need new enthusiasm. Bottom line, we need new cash. We need somebody else's green money because ours is getting thinner and thinner. And that's just a reality, and we see it all over throughout the community. So at some point, we are going to have to include the other communities of Muslims in the Muslim Journal. We try to be as discerning as possible that they are in the same vein of Islam that we are and going in the same direction. But no, they're not going to make oath that they are followers of Imam W.D. Muhammad. We understand that. But the Imam told us to establish allies and look for people with like minds. And that's what we're about. And if we're going to ask them to support the journal, then they do have to see themselves in the journal. From FOI to decorated soldier, Brother Sultan talks about his father, Captain. What was Sultan's father's name? Out of Newark. Captain Shaw out of Newark. Sultan used to ride with his father when his father would be pushing the Muhammad Speaks. So he came out of that environment, went into the military, and he's a 33-year veteran and a member of the masjid that we call the Nation's Mosque, with another 33-year veteran, Talib Sharif. And they're making great strides and inroads in Washington, D.C., where we have to have a presence. And we thank Allah for them because you can't disrespect these men. And you can't intimidate these men. So it's like the right people in the right place at the right time on our behalf. Tyler's wife she said, after he retired and came home, they were in Georgia, she said, I know we're going to make some money now. And he came home and told her he had put his name in a hat to be considered for being the imam in D.C. She said, what? She didn't know any imam that made some money. She just had to hang her head. After all these years, you're going to be an imam. Where? But Allah is merciful. She moved from Georgia and she's still with him. They say there are no Muslim women leaders. And they definitely don't think that the African continent has Muslim women leaders. Some are Muslim, some are not. But they are heroes. And while we're talking and we're excited about Hillary being the first presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party as a woman that could be the President of the United States, we've had 9 women prime ministers and presidents of Muslim countries. And when we say that, people try to pick that apart. They say, well, her husband died and then she assumed the position, and then they dwindled it down to maybe about 4 or 5 were actually elected in the office. The other ones moved up into the position as something occurred tragically. But nevertheless, you can't take it away that we've had 9 women heads of state, president or prime ministers of Muslim countries, and we're still excited that we got a nominee. They said, why are you on the street? We are out there. It does matter to us what's happening in our community. People assume that because we became Muslim, we took the oath of Islam, that we are no longer African American. And it doesn't hurt us when we see our young boys shot down in the street. Whether they should have been in the street or not, they're still our sons, they're still our daughters. It's still important to us as human beings, and it's more important to us as Muslims because we took an oath to do better and to make better. You know, it's said that when a Muslim lives somewhere, we should improve our environment. And if you move away from somewhere, you should have left it better than when you found it. So how can we walk away from our communities when we have these things happening to our youth? And they said, well, they're thugs. Well, that's what they said about Malcolm. One young brother on the radio station, a rapper, he said Malcolm had died 24, that's all he would have been remembered as, a thug. But Allah saw his potential and gave him the longevity to demonstrate on behalf of all African Americans, but in particularly for African American men, you have this potential in you no matter what your circumstances are at the time. And we were talking to some of the brothers who do prison services still, chaplains. We know for a fact that when our community was predominant in the prisons, and we were the ones doing the propagation in the prisons, that there were wardens and guards who came to the Muslims in those prisons, not just the imam that came in, but to the Muslim inmate in those prisons, and asked for their advice and their support in critical situations. Before I became Muslim, I went to school up in Lewisburg. Bucknell is in Lewisburg. There's nothing black in Lewisburg. Only way we could find some black people was to go over to the federal pen. So I started doing prison services as a student, and then I did my internship in prison services. We left Pennsylvania and went up through Massachusetts, and sometimes, you know, young is real stupid. We could do some stupid stuff as young people. And when I see these kids doing things today, I say, it was only by the grace of God we didn't hurt ourselves, you know, because that was in, everybody else was protesting the Vietnam War and whatever. Kent State got shot up, Jackson State got shot up, but we up in here, we going into all these prisons. And we go up through Massachusetts, we going to Concord, Norfolk, Bridgewater. Anybody know what Bridgewater is? It was the Boston Stranglers' home. Bridgewater is for the criminally insane. And it was about 10 years later, it dawned on me, you went to Bridgewater, you are so damn dumb. We went to Framingham, we lived at Framingham, and when we were sitting among the women and other people come through, they didn't know who was who. When I came into the community and joined prison services, we went through all the prisons in Illinois. Stateville, Pontiac. We went to Menard, and Menard was supposed to be the prison, but when they closed Alcatraz, they moved some of those inmates to Menard. Menard was where they kept the brothers who did the shoot-up in D.C., where the babies were killed and all that. And you look in these brothers' eyes, I've never seen sadder eyes in my life, because he know he's never getting out, but it was even more than not getting out, because people adjust to prison life, and they look happy. You know, they look drove. There was nothing happy in this brother's eyes. He just looked defeated and sad, and it was a great burden. You could see the burden on him. Dr. Lana Shabazz, I don't know if everybody remembers Lana Shabazz. Well, in Lewisburg Federal Pen, there was a riot. There were Muslim brothers in the riot, and this one Muslim brother in the riot wouldn't talk to anybody but Dr. Lana Shabazz. We bring to the attention those things that all communities are doing to enhance the success of our community, starting with our children. We follow the politicians in our community. We all know Congressman Andre Carson, right? We all know that his father-in-law is Judge David Shaheed, right? What we don't know is that Andre Carson's grandmother was in Congress, and she groomed him as in her older years, and she died while in office. She groomed him to go out and represent her whenever she couldn't make it to places. And he had leanings towards being Muslim then. Now, his grandmother was a great supporter of Farrakhan, Minister Farrakhan. We all know Keith Ellison, the first Muslim in Congress. Some people may not know that Keith Ellison actually came into Islam through the Million Man March. And when he began to look for his political future, he realized, I better join W.D. Muhammad's community. He is a smart man. sometimes we can have so much bad news, we just want to be happy for a while. And the Muslim musicians among us, Leonard Harper and there are others. We're having a Muslim Journal dinner this year in Kansas City, Missouri, and they are great musicians who are Muslims who have passed on, who are documented and remembered in Kansas City, and they'll be featured in our presentations this December. And we have more information about that. Of course, to do the research that was needed for this one, we had to rely on Aramco. Aramco had already published the connection between the Southern blues heritage and the Muslim call to prayer. And they gave us permission to reprint their entire research. It took them a couple of years to do, to make those connections. We acknowledge all of our holidays. We acknowledge our schools, our children, and we are as equally concerned about the future of our schools as we are concerned about the Muslim Journal. We need schools for our Muslim children. If you want your children to marry a Muslim, then you need to put them in a seat next to a Muslim. And the one good thing about the Claire Muhammad schools in Atlanta is they have students who meet there and marry out of that school. If your child is going to school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and all extracurricular with non-Muslims, which is not the bad thing, but don't be alarmed when they say, Mommy, Daddy, I want to marry John Richards. And they say, I would and you try to tell her, well, little Omar looks good. But she hadn't seen Omar for 5 days, 8 hours a day, like she's been seeing John Richard. So if we want to have that influence on them, then they need Muslim schools. It's not only important for their education, it's important for their camaraderie and for their cohesiveness and their bond and for them to look to each other. So we might say, well, the Muslim school doesn't offer the STEMs program or all these technology. They don't have a computer lab. But what about your grandchildren? Are they going to be John Smith too? So we make the sacrifices and we have to make the call. So we're as concerned about our schools as we are concerned about the institution of the Muslim Journal. Our school numbers are down. We know when Barack Obama was running for office, Imam W.D. Muhammad just lit up. And from then on, he had the theme of goodness is on the rise. And so we were sitting in Chicago, we were still saying Obama who. He was coming out of state senate and then going to the Congress. We knew him. When it was election time, he would walk through, shake hands, vote for me for this or that. But we hadn't studied his history, the name, and when he would say Barack, we'd say Barack, and he said yes, blessings. But it was Imam Muhammad that picked up on the content of him and the spirit of him and let us know, sound the alarm, this man is going to impact this country, and he actually used the words, he's going to change the face on this country. We try to acknowledge the progress that our community is making, and no better example than Masjid Allah in Philadelphia, and that's why we had the last time to be grateful. They've impacted that community. Now they moved from a storefront to this. They were in a storefront before they bought this property. They've impacted that community so much, everybody walks by and says, look at what the Muslims did. And when they would have meetings, precinct meetings about what was going to be done to the property in that area, the non-Muslims came out and said, we want Masjid Allah to get that property. It was some store chain coming in. They wanted to get the lot next to it. It was a vacant lot at the time, and Masjid Allah wanted the lot also for future development. They went up against a store chain, but the neighborhood people came out and said, we don't want the store chain there. We want Masjid Allah to get that property. They just got the Eid holidays put on the calendar for Philadelphia public schools. Jimmy Carter was invited by ISNA, and we acknowledge our sister Tayyiba Taylor, who was the founder